Hey there and welcome back to another Miraculous Ladybug Season 6 review, and today we'll be talking about the episode Wreckless Driver, which was yet another excellent episode for the season. They really are putting out such an incredible body of work in my opinion. I keep waiting for the penny to drop and for a terrible episode to come out. I've been conditioned to hot runs coming to an abrupt and tragic end in this day and age, but so far so good. Let's hope it continues throughout the whole season and they don't fumble it at the very end. Like I said, this episode's titled Wreckless Driver, and sits after Revelator in the production order, although I think that for a lot of episodes the production order isn't always the actual chronological order. Regardless, we're starting to fill in some of the blank corners of the season, and hopefully we start to get a couple more big revelations coming out of these episodes. I suppose we'll have to wait and see on that score though. Also, before we go any further, I wrote pretty much all of this before Dark Castle came out, so if there are any plot important spoilers in that episode, I won't know it in this video. On to the episode though. We start off in the middle of Paris with a bunch of folks relaxing on that artificial riverside beach thing, only for a giant akumatized lollipop man to charge in and smash a footbridge and attached train track. Luckily enough, there was nobody on it, but regardless, a bunch of people were about to suffer a pretty horrific end, plummeting into the Seine whilst trapped inside a train car. Inside one of these carriages is the ever-suspicious potential red herring character Aglae, who's of course screaming and panicking because why wouldn't you be? I was expecting to see Ladybug or Cat Noir swoop in out of nowhere to stop the train, but of course one of the fun things about Season 6 is the potential for all these different types of hero team matchups. Anybody can be called in at any time, and so it makes for a far more varied story and far more varied action sequences. Here Vesperia jumps down on top of the carriage and uses Venom to stop the wheels, before jumping in front of the train itself Spider-Man style to try to stop its ongoing momentum. I do love a good Spidey reference, and to give it to a New York character, that was fun. Although when the actual carriage falls over the edge of the cliff and starts dangling, Zoe's nowhere to be seen. Oh, that's pretty weak. She's quite clearly invulnerable, so at the very least she should be going down with the ship, so to speak, not jumping away at the last second. Aglae ends up sliding down onto the window, which immediately gives way and she begins to fall to her death. Okay, so in a world of superheroes and magical evil butterflies that can turn you into a giant angry lollipop man, this is probably one of the more ridiculous things I've seen. Train windows are not some cheap plastic film that's going to fall out at the slightest impact or just from the weight of a girl and her scooter. Train windows are very strong because otherwise, like in this version of the story, it means a very strong person will be easily able to push the glass out while the train is moving. That's not a great design choice. A real train is reinforced to ensure that your local crackhead is not able to do this kind of thing. Also, what was even going on with the whole out-of-control train thing anyway? They were clearly at the front of the train, so where was the driver? I know that there wouldn't have been any time to properly stop, but my god, they could have slammed the brakes anyway, right? Although, isn't the driver supposed to be in a fully separate cab to the passengers? How is there a windscreen for Aglae to fall through in the first place? Where are the controls? Seems like there need to be some sort of safety inquiry, right? Except since Ladybug can reverse everything, nobody's going to bother with that. Aglae's falling and Ladybug swoops in to save her, but is she appreciative? No, not at all. Instead, she starts thrashing around and demanding that she put her down. Sure, guess I'll just drop you into the Seine then. I get being scared, but girl needs a lick of self-preservation in moments like this. Once they get on the ground, then you can thrash and run away to your heart's content. I know you can't help your fears, but yikes. Vesperia then swoops down afterwards, and together she and Ladybug take out the villain off-screen before we head into the credits. When we return, Marinette and Ali are having a little bit of a gossip session in the school's rooftop garden about how Aglae is actually legitimately frightened of Ladybug, and they just can't understand why. They look over to her and see her panicking about a real ladybug in the plant she's tending to, and so they rush over to try to reassure her, but it doesn't quite go to plan, and she ends up running away in fear once more. Later, after class, she confesses to them that she's had this problem ever since she was first akumatized. At first, the fear was just about butterflies because they reminded her of the akuma, but then it spiraled to include other bugs, and now it's stretched to include bug-themed heroes like Ladybug. She knows that it's irrational, but she can't quite help it. She just freezes up and needs to get away. After they drop her off at the next class, they offer to meet for lunch, and Alia then has to comfort Marinette because she blames herself for not securing the Butterfly Miraculous after Gabe was defeated, and is coming to understand that being able to reverse all the damage of a villain doesn't mean everything's actually going to be fixed. I liked this a lot, to tell you the truth. I feel that for 5 seasons, the show really did brush over the fact that being akumatized would be friggin' scary. The only thing you can remember is getting angry or scared, and then you wake up with no memory in a completely different place. You might be reported about on the news, and it just wouldn't be a very good time, especially if you'd actually killed people. Even though they were brought back, they still would have died. And I feel like it's the same for those that were actually killed. It's not like they lose their memories of what happened to them. That's just the akumatized folk, so I think this ends up being pretty messed up. And so I love that they're trying to explore more mature themes of trauma and mental health. The writing is really stepping up to the next level this season. Some of our heroes meet up with Aglae for lunch, and despite knowing that bugs make her shit scared, they do this outside where it's likely she's going to see a bug or two. Seriously, food outside is almost certainly going to attract at least one fly, which it does, and she freaks out and runs away. How did nobody think this was going to happen? Come on now. Back inside, she declares that she's going to stay home and never leave again, and of course her friends don't want that to happen. Instead, they try to offer up a solution. Marinette, true to form, comes up with a very out there idea. She decides the thing that Aglae needs to feel safe is an anti-bug suit. I love that this season's really leaned into the idea that Marinette is very eccentric and her friends know this and accept it. It's always something that's been there in her character, but now we're getting more banter about it and also other characters acknowledging that it is weird, but they love her anyway. It's like when Adrian was trying to explain to Sublime why Marinette was creeping on her from behind a pot plant, or like this moment to tell you the truth. Max then says the best thing to do is to see a specialist, like he does because he's on the autism spectrum. Adrian showcases just how sheltered he really is by not even knowing what that means, which has me wondering, what's going on in his life? I know he was homeschooled, but surely you still learn about things, right? I get not knowing pop culture, or even how he didn't know the rules to football, but this one's baffling. Aglae is still a bit hesitant about going, but then Mylène mentions that she also went to this very same psychiatrist to help her get over all of her crippling fears. And that's true, she used to be scared of everything, even Ivan. Those three bully characters reappear to try to talk shit, but Alia and Max slap them down for their failed social skills and bad personalities, and the scene moves right along. I love the growth we're seeing here where now everybody in the team's willing to step up to bullies, and they won't even bother giving them the time of day. From a writing perspective, I think those types of bullies do get very old and boring when they always get the upper hand on the lead characters. They need to be more sneaky behind the scenes types to be effective foils for the heroes, picking on weak links when they're all alone or by spreading lies and gossip. It seems that they haven't learnt their lesson from the end of Sleeping Siren because here they are, still talking their shit, but I'm glad. They were good villains in that episode because they were used in a very creative way. I'm eager to see how else they can be used going forward and what they get up to. I'm excited. We cut over to the office where many of her friends have come in as moral support to wait while she has her first appointment. The doctor sits her down and tells her that she spoke to her dad on the phone, who in turn told her that she'd been having some problems, and we get a bit of exposition about the root of her fears. We already knew she'd been akumatized, but here it seems that she was actually the first person to be akumatized by Chrysalis. She figured that since Hawkmoth had been defeated, it would be safe for her to leave the house for the first time in ages, so already a bit suspicious. Just conveniently hiding away unknown to everybody until the right moment. The class was meant to go up to the Butterfly House, which they apparently have on campus because of course they do. They turned this place into Hogwarts in the gap between the seasons after all. She was too afraid to go in and got left behind, which meant that eventually the three bullies came across her and they fooled her into going in by telling her that they would too, before locking her in there and laughing as they did so. She ends up getting akumatized, which could suggest that she isn't actually suspicious. But we have seen that Lila's able to plant akumas ahead of time for later use. We saw that in the London special, so we'll see. Plus, in this episode, instead of showing Lila talking to her, it simply has her tell the therapist that she did, which is generally not something you do unless you have something to hide. From a story perspective, from an episode perspective, it's always better to show, not tell. That's why part of me thinks that something is off. Also, her villain is a butterfly-themed character, with a butterfly suit, the butterfly Miraculous, and what hatches from a chrysalis, a butterfly. She also turns her enemies into cocoons, which is on the nose to me. Then again, it also gets to the point where it kind of feels so obvious, and so I think it could also be the writers throwing in that obvious red herring now, so they can swerve us later on down the road. Ah, man, this is so much fun! The season's bringing back storylines that we can make proper theories about again. I'm so excited. For now, though, let's just play it straight, like she is 100% above suspicion. I like that they really dive into more of that trauma yet again, of knowing that you were possessed but not being able to remember anything, but then there being clips of you online. It's actually rather horrific. It then gets even more horrific because the episode further forces us to confront how terrible it would be to be victimized by an akumatized villain. You get all the trauma, but you don't get to forget about it. And this is apparently what happened to Aglae in Season 1 off-screen during the events of Time Tagger. She got tagged and started to fade, but she was fully conscious, slowly losing her sense of time and space, and yet being fully aware that she was fading out of existence. Then kaboom, it's reversed and she's fine, but isn't this truly so messed up? I feel that in the chaos of the show, you can sometimes forget about all of this and the shit they get put through, so I think it is clever writing to force you as the audience to confront it. It's all going so well, she's unpacking the trauma, and it seems the therapist is coming to an understanding of where they need to begin. But then it goes to shit. Aglae, after all, thinks that she's going to be healed in one session. She doesn't like hearing that it's going to be a gradual process that's going to take multiple sessions. Fair enough too, I know that it's necessary, but when you have fears that are this crippling, that's clearly a massive problem, and you probably feel like you can't afford to wait. So she smashes the toy car the therapist gave her and flees from the building in tears. Also, there was a lot of rage coming off her too. Surprisingly though, she's not the person who the akuma comes for. No, instead it's the therapist who's feeling slightly guilty that she couldn't help her, although I feel like that's more of a difficult sell for being akumatized, right? After all, being a therapist means that you would be exposed to this sort of thing a lot, I would suspect. So it's a little bit sus again. Why'd it target her and not Aglae? Meanwhile, as all of this was going on, we had a bit of a troubling scene in the waiting room. The students were all talking about how good this doctor is and how beneficial talking to a professional can be. We learned that Ali has visited this doctor before to help with some of her family issues, which I'm honestly rather curious about. Do we think that this is planting a seed for some future story for Alia, deep diving more into her life, or is it just a throwaway comment? Adrian then mentions how he's interested in seeing this doctor to talk about his dad, and Marinette tries to talk him out of it because she's his girlfriend, so she can help him. What's her angle here? Is she trying to discourage him because she's worried he'll somehow figure out the truth about his dad, even though it kind of feels impossible for him to figure that out on his own? Or is she just being a bit weird here? I will say, a partner trying to discourage you from seeking mental health treatment in favour of talking to them instead reads like a ginormous red flag. I do think that Marinette has overall improved as a character this season, but this take from her felt so out there. She was almost feeling hurt that he'd even want to talk to a therapist instead of her. Massive yikes moment. Dude's so used to being controlled as well that he was just going to go along with this until Alia steps in to make them both understand that it's okay for him to go and talk with somebody outside of just her. It's really sad that he's still so easily led. Yeah, so I came away with a big time icky feeling from this scene. I also just kind of felt like it was a little bit out of character for her, although I could be wrong on that score. Anyway, eventually they notice Aglae run out and they go after her, which leads to the big action sequence of the episode. The doctor gets akumatized, and once again, I really love the writing for Lila when she talks to them. The doctor's firmly against being akumatized and she's not going to let it happen until Lila tells her that by using her powers, she'll be able to help heal everybody, and that Chrysalis is actually misunderstood too. She just wants to help people, not hurt them. And it ties back into her trait of being able to wrap everybody around her little finger that she had in the earlier seasons. But this time it's written in a way that makes a lot more sense and doesn't make the characters feel actively stupid, because now she's manipulating people using a magical butterfly, but preying on their heightened negative emotions. Plus, she even has answers to the doctor's doubts. When the doctor tries to claim that there are no magical solutions to problems, she reminds her, well, Ladybug can magically fix things, so why not us? Thus she becomes Wreckless Driver, driving around in a car that sucks you up and mind controls you to remove all your trauma, but not in a good way. She bursts out of her office and the students all scatter, with Wreckless Driver chasing Aglae, who's cycling off, whilst the heroes all go to separately transform in secret. I will say though that Aglae is impressively fast on that bicycle. She manages to get quite a distance away and is taking big risks like swerving in front of a bus to try to escape. Hell, the car never even actually catches her. She has to shoot out some Looney Tunes style cable with a sucker on the end to grab her and pull her inside. Here we get a full brain scan which showcases her intense fear of bugs, which she's able to properly remove. Okay, so here's some of the proof that she's just a red herring, right? The current hot theory seems to be that she could be Lila in disguise, which does have a lot of evidence we've talked about before, both in this video and after Climatic Queen released. But then how do you fake this bug fear? Unless she's legitimately scared of bugs but has gone full mind over matter this whole time? I feel like this would need to be its own separate video at some point. She then gets ejected from the car via springboard seat like an old-timey cartoon, although at least she has a parachute attached to her so she doesn't just straight up die. Ladybug ends up saving her before we cut over to Cat Noir, who's following the car and who intervenes to save some random dude who was just healed and ejected just like Aglae. This guy was apparently once afraid of cars, but now he's so apathetic to them that he decides to sunbake on a chair in the middle of the road. A great way to get yourself killed, and it kind of shows that it is good to have fears because they help to shape your sense of caution and your sense of self-preservation. Cat Noir's hardly going to let this guy die, and so he folds him inside the chair, then takes him to the park. This was just the perfect little time waster scene, just a joke for the sake of having a joke, although actually I guess it's there to justify the heroes intervening because otherwise the villain's power does seem like an absolute win, doesn't it? But if it makes you more reckless and puts you in danger, well, then maybe not so much. Here we see that the heroes that were all at the office have all transformed and are on the case, and once again, we get a great action sequence where all the heroes get a little bit of time to shine, and we see them working together to try to take down the villain. However, Driver proves to be rather good at escaping, avoiding all of Pegasus's portals, and also escaping from Purple Tigress's big power punch. She shakes off Ladybug when she tries to cling onto the top of the car, and leaps over a barrier that Cat Noir had set up. Polymouse lands on top of the car and is also brushed off with the windscreen wipers, which I found to be very funny, before Reen is able to summon an illusionary hedge to try to slow down the car and trap her. At the end of this hedge maze is a handy portal which drops into the river right near where Cat Noir's located, and so he can power up into his swimsuit to jump in to attack her and find the Akuma. This whole sequence It's just peak. Seriously, the writing for the action sequences, having all these powers working together, it's so well done this season as opposed to what we previously got. In seasons past, we'd sometimes get cool flashes of brilliance, but this season and this episode especially have just been awesome. What I also like is that they're not always on the back foot anymore, struggling to hold their own despite the numbers game, and also they seem like experienced heroes. And this is good, because they've done this a lot and most villains are completely new to the idea of having powers and fighting. I'm sure that some people are going to be annoyed that Cat Noir was caught and defeated, but at the same time, it's not like they made him look weak. I think it's pretty clear he would have been fine on his own and would have done well against the villain. It's just that he got distracted by Ladybug on the phone and he got. It happens and it doesn't really make him look bad. It is not like the old days where he'd simply lose because he wasn't good enough to win. I will say though that when he was inside the car, he could have cataclysmed it well before Chrysalis blocked his powers, because it takes time for that to happen in the scene and his hand was resting on the car seat he was strapped onto. So I do think that was some massive plot armor for the villain right there. It was a little bit of lazy writing perhaps to up the stakes for the big fight with all the other heroes. So his powers are blocked and his fear of revealing his identity is lost, but as he's going to lose his Miraculous too, Ladybug portals in, stuffs a sandwich in his mouth to stop him blurting out his real name, and then she grapples a bit with the villain. However, what I liked about this fight is that Ladybug wasn't even the one who defeats her. She kind of gets slapped around until Polymouse gets portaled in, saves Adrian, blocks Ladybug losing her powers, and subdues the villain long enough for Purple Tigress to blow up the car with a big punch. She punches the car so hard that it completely disintegrates and the river drains. Plus the villain is briefly unconscious, which is rare because they're all invulnerable. Man, Milene and Julek are coming in clutch and getting some awesome hero moments here. I'm really enjoying the sharing of the spotlight like this, and I'm also noticing that even if he doesn't get many lines within an episode, it also feels like Max is one of the most frequently used heroes on the team outside of the big names. It's probably because his power is one of the most versatile and useful. The only thing I found overly ridiculous here was the survival of the little toy car. The only reason all the heroes and the villain aren't dead from Purple Tigress's massive punch is because their powers make them invulnerable. But the entire car is gone, including everything inside. Except for the little toy car? Nah. In reality, it should have been dusted and the akuma would have been released. They cleanse the akuma and everything's reversed, Ladybug gives the therapist a pep talk, and Lila copes and seethes in her lair. They're still not showing her face either, so there is something going on here. The problem is, I don't think we quite know enough to puzzle it out just yet. We then jump forward to Aglae and her friends and the therapist visiting the butterfly house, and they all form a protective circle around her for some exposure therapy. It's actually really cute, and so if she ends up being bad news, this is going to be so gut-wrenching, isn't it? I just don't know what to think. What do you guys think? Any ideas? We then finish off with Adrian heading to therapy with Marinette in the waiting room as some moral support, and he goes in and I guess tries to address his perceived difference in how he remembers his dad and how the world now views him. It seems to be a running theme for him this season. It's his arc, trying to come to grips with how his father was abusive and terrible, and yet how could that same man have possibly been a hero? Do we think he's actually going to figure it out alone? Is he going to start doing some detective work? Or is this simply here to show that he's struggling with it all and show the lingering effects of the lie that Marinette and Natalie have told him? Either way, I'm pretty hyped to see what comes of this. It wasn't a huge episode in terms of overall story, but it was a big character builder. Obviously, some storylines like Adrian's trauma are chugging along, and we might be getting seeds planted for the future too. Plus, there's the whole Aglae stuff, which could be something, or it could be nothing. Outside of all of that though, I just really like the exploration of what happens after the episode ends. That lingering trauma that's left behind with the characters. I think it makes the world feel more realistic and could lead to some really interesting story explorations going forward. The writing feels more mature, and yet it still feels like the same show. You might disagree, but I honestly think we're coming into a fresh golden age of the show, so long as they don't bungle the ending of this season. I think we might be looking back on Season 6 fondly someday. With all that being said though, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of Wreckless Driver? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.